Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903.
As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Happy Wednesday, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and we are talking today about free speech, and we have to talk about the fundamental worldview premise that a lot of people on the new right are very, very alarmingly promoting. It's this idea of against principled loserdom. And this isn't just related to the Disney issue, which I know a lot of you have asked me a lot of questions about, and I love all of your questions, but even more than the questions, I would love for you to listen to the responses and listen to my argument and listen to what the response has been from the greater conservative kind of MAGA community. So I'm going to have my good friend, Pastor Darrell Scott, on in just a moment to talk about these whole ideas of conservatism, where we're at today, and how we can think through all of this in a principled fashion. But before that, I want to play for you just a short clip. It's about 10 minutes of my conversation with Austin Peterson on the radio this past Monday. And we talked about what the real issue is behind the principles of freedom of speech. So I've still had a lot of people asking me questions about the Disney issue, about Ron DeSantis, about free speech, about a lot of these things dealing with the Constitution. So please listen to this, because we have a great conversation that explains this. And then Pastor Scott and I are going to take it a lot further, and we're going to talk about how we as Christians, but also as conservatives, need to respond to the greater cultural debate. So listen to this first.
There's such a thing as good politics and bad governing. In the battle between Ron DeSantis and Walt Disney World, the opinions have been very broad on whether or not Ron DeSantis is doing the right thing in retaliating against Disney for saying that they disagree with the Don't Say Gay bill that was recently passed. Some conservatives have said that this was the right move, that we should crush our enemies until we hear the lamentations of their women, and others have said that perhaps this sets a bad precedent, that even corporations like Disney have a right to free speech. One of the people making that argument is Jenna Ellis, who's joining on the show right now. She is a former senior legal advisor and counsel to Donald Trump. Good morning, Jenna. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. This is a watershed moment for conservatives.
It certainly is, Jenna. And, I'm not sure if I agree with your analysis on this one. I haven't decided whether or not what Ron DeSantis did was right or not, but I like to hear different viewpoints on this one. And, as somebody, who often, as a libertarian Republican, my views are often out of step with the Republican Party. I know what it's like to have the mob come after you for a slight disagreement, and that appears to be what's happening. So why don't you share with us your view of why you think what Ron DeSantis is doing in removing Disney's special exemption in Florida is the wrong move?
Sure. Well, first, I really appreciate that. And there is a distinction here that we have to understand up front, that pushing back against government overreach and saying that constitutionally protected rights exist and can be exercised for all is the principle at stake here. And it's really disappointing to see that some conservatives who know each other's values and integrity are missing that point and are actually going as far as saying that people who disagree with Ron DeSantis in Florida are somehow child groomers participating in LGBT wokeism or any of these cheap shots that really don't articulate the substance of the argument. So for the record, I disagree with Disney's wokeism. I disagree with their attacks on the parental rights and education bill. It is not a don't say gay bill. I think that they're actually being misleading all of the people who are trying to label it that way. So substantively, we can have that conversation. But legally, there is a distinction here that has to be made, because Disney has the right to participate in that conversation. And they have the right to say their corporate standpoint and even go after the legislation politically, using their time and resources and lobbying efforts to try to attack that bill, just like anyone else, any corporation or individual. And so I will defend their right to engage politically, just like I would defend a conservative's right to engage politically without government retaliation. And where Ron DeSantis and the state of Florida have crossed the line here is that they have specifically said they are targeting Disney for retaliation because of wokeism. That is an overreach of government, because imagine, and this has happened to companies like Chick-fil-A, who were being targeted by, for example, San Antonio, Texas, and weren't being allowed to put their store in the airport because of their conservative and Christian beliefs. That's wrong. And all conservatives came out in defense of them. Why is Disney different? Because conservatives disagree with the content of the speech. The Constitution does not make that distinction, and this principle cannot be abridged by Ron DeSantis any more than it can be San Antonio, Texas.
Now, Jenna, the argument that the new right is making, people like Josh Hammer and others, is that the Constitution is antiquated, the left doesn't follow the Constitution, the left is illiberal, and in order to fight illiberalism, the right must become illiberal. And that in order for us to crush our enemies, we have to engage in the same tactics that they engage in, because they would never offer us the kind of quarter that we would, that people like ourselves might offer to them, to say, take the high road, do the right thing. The left doesn't do that, so why should we?
Yeah, well, with all due respect to my very good friend Josh Hammer, he's completely wrong on this and looks at the Constitution as some antiquated boomerism, which is not at all the substance of our founding. Our founding fathers didn't look at England and George III and Parliament and say, they're infringing on our rights, so we have to use all of these same tactics against them. No, what did our founders do? They returned to principle, and they said, no, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they said that government is obligated to preserve and protect those rights. And so they created and fashioned one of the greatest legal documents in the history of mankind, in the Declaration of Independence, that was the mandate for our Constitution, because they appealed to a better form of government and a higher principle. They didn't just look and say, well, we have to win at all costs. They were not a rebellion. They were a principled revolution. And for conservatives who are tired of government overreach, I would appeal to them and my fellow colleagues to say, this isn't just about winning at any cost. The ends don't justify the means. We have to be solid on principles like our founders. Otherwise, we're throwing everything that's so great about this country away. Completely
agree. We're speaking to Jenna Ellis. She's a contributor on Newsmax. She's a former senior legal advisor and counsel to Donald Trump. Jenna, now the special exemption that Disney had been granted. It's like 50 or 60 years old. It allowed them to essentially to avoid the types of zoning regulations that other companies have to put up with in Florida. They have to provide their own fire and police and roads and things like that. Now, isn't it unfair that Disney is granted this special exemption, but, Universal Studios and all the other theme parks that are down there in Florida don't get that?
Well, that's also a separate conversation than targeted government retaliation. So if the state of Florida wanted to analyze that by itself and weren't attacking Disney for their speech and saying you're a woke company, therefore we're targeting you, that would be a wholly different conversation. And when we look at the context of special exemptions, special permits, special privileges, governments do that all the time. And it's when it's a benefit that's given to someone, that doesn't necessarily have to be equal. It's when they're infringing on a right. And so if Universal Studios was in California and had this same type of special exemption and was a conservative company, and Gavin Newsom in the state of California said, we're going to revoke one of your permits to put up, a ride attraction to combat your conservative Christian beliefs, you better bet people like Josh Hammer would say that's wrong. And so this is where we have to parse these different issues. And I think a lot of people are so frustrated with the wokeism and with the cultural left and with Disney's speech. They are conflating all of these issues. And thankfully, lawyers will parse this in court. But conservatives need to also be able to approach this and analyze it for the issues rather than just based on our feelings. Otherwise, hey, isn't that the same thing the left is doing? We always call them out on.
Yeah, it is. It's just, I think that what we're really narrowing down here to, Jenna, is a question of tribalism, right? It's about, if you're on our side, then we'll do whatever it takes to protect our side. If it's the other side's people, then it's okay if we do it. It's not okay if they do it, essentially, is what we've engaged in. Yeah. But I mean, this is where the party is headed. I mean, here's the thing, Jenna, and this is just a light critique, is that's what the MAGA movement was about from the beginning. It was, you're either on our side or you're against us. In 2018, I ran very unsuccessfully for Senate here in the state of Missouri because I wasn't considered a MAGA candidate. It was very much, you're an outsider. The very first question anybody asked when I did phone calls was, what do you think of Trump? And if you weren't for Trump, then you're out, right? It's become a very cultish mentality on the right to channel the left. It's this new populism that is, they call themselves anti-elitists, but they very much want to abolish American institutions as they were before, and they paint anybody who isn't on their side as an aggressor or as, somehow responsible for allowing the left to win, raising the white flag of surrender. I mean, it's tribalism, but I mean, this is what the MAGA movement was, Jenna, and you were very much a part of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I agree with you that the new right and this cult-like tribalism is not principled conservatism. And that's the part of the MAGA movement that I think is actually very dangerous to America when we have this, it's right if it's red, it's wrong if it's blue mentality, rather than looking at equal protection under the law, which is exactly what our founding is. And so there's nothing wrong with developing majorities and saying these are the principles that we stand for. This is what our party stands for example. But this is also the new Republican Party. And frankly, part of the reason that I very famously left the Republican Party last year because of these types of issues. And so while I love and support and obviously worked for President Trump directly in support of so much good that he did, I do think that there is a characterization of MAGA that has shaped this whole base in a way that is unprincipled. It is cult-like, and I'm seeing that in a lot of the responses that, well, I thought you were one of us. And there was a Twitter responder that even said to me, well, I thought that she was going to defend what we stand for. We need to make her pay the price for going. And I thought, wow, that sounds like the French Revolution, not the American one.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Jenna Ellis, this is a fascinating topic. I'm going to keep watching this as it unfolds on Twitter, and I'm definitely going to want to have you back on as this is continuing, because I don't think that this fight is over yet. But I appreciate you coming on and making your case here for us, and we are grateful for your time, Jenna. Thank you.
Thank you for approaching it in a decent and honest and good faith manner. That's exactly what we have to keep doing. Yeah, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Jenna. Yeah.
In November of 2020, the Democrats and their allies intentionally changed and ignored state law in the administration of the election. They were planning to pull off the greatest scheme, worse than Watergate. They didn't think we would catch them, but we did. Find out more details about what happened, how they did it, in the new documentary film called 2,000 Mules, directed and narrated by renowned filmmaker and my friend Dinesh D'Souza, and executive produced by the Salem Media Group. This is also with research from truethevote.org. 2,000 Mules tells the story of the ones who tried to hijack a presidential election. You'll see the actual video surveillance tapes. You'll see how their cell phones were tracked to box after box as they got paid to carry out this illegal scheme. Watch the movie and decide the truth for yourself. Attend a limited release premiere of 2,000 Mules on May 2nd or May 4th. Check your local listings and get your tickets today at 2000mules.com. That's the number 2000mules.com. So joining me now to continue this conversation is my good friend, Pastor Darrell Scott, who has been a champion in the ring of not only conservatism, but also, of course, the biblical and truthful worldview. So Pastor Scott, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, my friend.
Absolutely. And, I want to continue this conversation because I think this is a watershed moment in conservatism where we have this new right that is willing to sacrifice all of the principles that our founders fought and bled and died for. And that's I'm not even just using rhetoric there. They're literally willing to abandon the rule of law just to have some temporary wins. And they're calling this against principled loserdom. That was the actual title of a Newsweek opinion piece by my good friend Josh Hammer, who is Jewish. He's not a Christian, full disclosure. But I think from someone who's a lawyer who understands how to be principled and why the Constitution matters. This to me was frankly surprising that this whole attitude of let's just burn it all to the ground has become a mantra for a lot of the MAGA base. What's your response, Pastor?
You're absolutely right, Jenna. Now, there are a lot of things that people say that I don't like, but I have to respect their right to say it. And we can't take away people's right to message because we don't like the message. And that's where it seems as if our base is going. A lot of the things that we complain and we whined and we moaned about, suppression of our voices, and especially on social media, how they wouldn't allow us to say certain things, and we couldn't voice our opinion regarding January 6th. We couldn't voice our opinion regarding whether or not we thought the election was tainted or whatever. And we complained about that suppression of free speech. Then we want to turn around and practice the same thing that we preached against prior. And that's what I don't like. I don't like the hypocritical aspect of it. No one says that they like Disney's message. I hope we're on point and people can clearly hear us. I might not be in agreement with the Disney's message, but I have to allow Disney. I don't think that government retaliation against an unpopular message by a certain political party is something that we need to be buying into, because it could very well happen to us next. If the Democrats start looking at Republican messages and saying we're going to go after this Republican messenger because we don't like the Republican message, then we'll be crying foul.
Exactly. And that's the whole point of why this is hypocritical. And of course, these conservatives who are, maybe conservatives in name only, who don't understand the core principle here, they are saying, well, this is so foul and so disgusting and so abhorrent that Disney would actually go against a parental rights and education bill, that they would actually put in content in some of their offerings and some of their things that they do, that we have to go against them with every tool that is in our arsenal. Well, why aren't these same conservatives so concerned about going against and retaliating against all companies who are giving all of these types of messages? I mean, unfortunately, unsavory communication, even to the level of pornography, is protected under the First Amendment. That doesn't mean we have to participate in it. That doesn't mean we have to like it. Certainly, there are limits on that, like when we get to child pornography. But we're certainly not going to say that just because we find the message itself of Disney saying, we don't like a particular piece of legislation, that means it's okay for the government to retaliate. And I think a lot of people are confusing that message, or they're simply saying, I don't care. We have to, by force, suppress messages we don't like, instead of recognizing that politics and policy is a matter ultimately for the public square and for public debate.
Yeah, I think the second one is more apropos when you said they're saying we don't care, because that's what I see a lot. If I'm using social media as a gauge, as a barometer, they don't care about the fact that we're saying it's the free speech, the ability to practice free speech that's being defended here, not the message itself. I don't care. I don't care. Disney is getting privileges. Take the privileges away. Retaliate against them. And that's the part that I don't like, because once again, where does it stop? This could be a starting point. If it happens right here, it can balloon, it can be a domino effect, it can mushroom and spiral out of control to the extent that the government is able to retaliate against any message that the government feels is opposed to any legislation it wants to pass.
Right. Or, this is why conservatives so ardently fought for the cake baker and the florist and Coach Kennedy, who was just in the Supreme Court on Monday. I mean, this is not a new thing that conservatives are fighting for free speech protections for everyone. And so it's not that we're just all of a sudden standing up and saying, oh, well, when it comes to Disney and a multi-million-dollar corporation, then we'll fight and we'll champion these issues. No, this is just the first time that it has been a Republican retaliating against a woke company with government resources, that now we're saying, no, we can't allow this in any context. And just like how we fought those other battles, and thankfully Jack Phillips and Masterpiece won at the Supreme Court, and I anticipate Coach Kennedy, who prayed and knelt just in a moment of silent prayer on the 50-yard line of a high school football field, that's protected speech. In the exact same way, leftists find that offensive and unsavory. So just because conservatives find Disney unsavory, and we can have the moral conversation all day, we have to allow that moral conversation. And I think that's the point. But Pastor, I also find it very, very bad faith. And that's the best way I can describe it, just totally in bad faith, for so many people to stand up and say, against you and against me and against others who are saying, hey, equal protection of the law matters, and say, oh, well, this means that you're a traitor, you're a fraudster, you're a grifter, you're all of these other things that they just want to accuse based on one principled speaking, one thing that we're saying that's principled. They want to then throw everything away and say, oh, well, you must have some ulterior motive, instead of saying, wait, I see the consistency here.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's like you're only as good as your last tweet. You're only as good as your last post. And they'll throw you away all of your good. You can do 99 things that they approve of, one thing they disapprove of, and they'll act as if the 99 never existed. You know what? I want to go back and visit something you said. I remember some years ago when Obama was president, and they issued an edict, so to speak, that pastors didn't have have the right to refuse to perform same-sex marriages. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of my colleagues were in an uproar, and we went back, a number of us went back and had to amend our articles and bylaws to reflect the fact that because of our principles, mm-hmm. We don't want to partake in this engagement. And the left said one thing and the right said another thing. And I was also able to cause to mind, and it caused me to think. Ilhan Omar, who I'm vehemently opposed to in almost every way, when they saw that the Christians were praising God on an airplane flight, mm-hmm. she said something that, I don't want to be hypocritical in my mindset, my thought processes. She said, I wonder what the reaction would have been from the right if a number of Muslims had got up and began to pray and chant and praise Allah on a plane. And it caused me to think, and I know for a fact, a lot of our side would have had a problem with it.
Right.
Now, am I anti-Muslim? No, I'm pro-Christianity. But as a result, I still have to respect their right to engage in that type of behavior. And there's a lot on our side that wouldn't have respected that. They would have been tweeting stuff saying, I wish that plane had crashed.
Right. Right. And that's what's so frustrating is that conservatives are not seeing the hypocrisy here. And because they find certain speech to be dissatisfactory to them or unsavory or even hate speech, they can't understand that their own speech is viewed just the same way by the left. And that's where if everybody gets to censor speech that they personally find distasteful, nobody gets to speak anymore. And that's the problem. And so I think you're absolutely right in what you suggest. And I've even heard that same argument on the religious liberty side, saying, well, we shouldn't allow mosques to come into our cities. We shouldn't allow people to practice their faith in certain ways. And I'm going, well, what if someone said that about your Christian faith? And that's the whole idea of religious liberty, that the government does not establish what is the true religion. It does not establish because of our Christian founding, believe it or not, because God himself does not compel us to speak truth. We can accept or reject him. We can accept or reject truth. We have that free will. And the entire point of the First Amendment is that government is not the arbiter of truthful speech. And so when we look at this whole misinformation kind of just absolute meltdown that the left is having, going, oh my gosh, Elon Musk is now going to own Twitter and there's going to be so much misinformation. It's like, well, then maybe Brian Stelter, maybe Joy Reid, maybe Rachel Maddow, you have to actually come up with a more convincing argument. And if Christians are so concerned that Disney is going to use its resources to promote their viewpoint on gender identity issues, and they're so concerned with what is on Disney Plus, then maybe instead of saying we need to censor and silence that, they need to look inward to themselves and think, if my kid knows more about the worldview of Mickey Mouse than he does about Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, that's on the parents, that's on the church. That's not a marketplace, a free marketplace issue.
You're absolutely right. If you don't like it, turn the channel. I'll give an example. My daughter, Jenna, and my daughter is actually, you're younger than my daughter. But you'll be able to identify with this. My daughter was raised in the public school system that taught evolution. And they teach the theory of evolution basically as fact. I didn't have a big issue with it because I taught her creation at home. She was raised learning the Bible, knowing the Bible, and with parents that said, I don't care what they told you there, this is what's right and this is what's wrong. And she chose to trust our word over the word of her teachers in school. And so a lot of people are getting bent out of shape over what Disney could possibly feed to their children. But you make sure you feed them the right thing. You know what the Bible says, Jenna. I know it. Train up a child in the way he should go. Mm-hmm. When he was old, when they get older, they won't depart from it. And that's what we have a lot of times. They want to control we don't want our message controlled, but we want to control messages. It's very hypocritical. Watch this. I said something, and it just seems like people on Twitter are crazy or nuts. Or I think I tweeted something that said people don't read with comprehension. Yeah. Madison Cawthorn found himself with some unflattering pictures on the internet, and I simply said, I wonder what the reaction of the right would be if he was a Democrat. Yeah. And boy, you're attacking him. You're attacking that. All it was, he was on a cruise ship having fun, you attacked him. And I'm like, yeah, you're a rhino. You're a fraud. You're a grifter. I'm going to, you're Trump. Somebody needs to tell Trump. And I would always say, well, call him up and tell him there. Yeah. But they didn't understand. Madison was actually not the subject.
Yeah.
The subject was the reaction of the right if he had been a Democrat. And I try not to be hypocritical in my reactions and say, well, I can judge a Democrat. If he'd have been a young Democrat congressman and they had these unflattering pictures out, we would not have been so quick to excuse or apologize for the behavior as if he was on our side. And so, they came back, I said, it was just a stupid costume party. I said, well, okay, then Ralph Northam gets a pass for his blackface at a stupid costume party 37 years ago. Oh, no, you're only white. Look at you. You're a racist. You're race baiting now. No, I'm not. I'm just trying to cause you to open your mind and think. The Bible says a false balance is an abomination. The Bible says judge righteous judgment. I try not to be hypocritical. Shakespeare, in one of his plays, Jenna, you know what he said? To thine own self be true. And I just want to be able to lay my head on my pillow at night and not have to be, I'm too old to have to be fake and phony and things like that. And I just want to stimulate some conversation. What would our reaction be if some of our behavior, and let me say this one last thing, I know I'm being long. When the January 6th thing first came out, the whatever they called it, whatever happened on January 6th, you know what my tweet was? This is a case of the chickens coming home to roost. Because, and that's what Malcolm X said when Kennedy, but what I was saying was, we watched a protest all summer long. And America put out the paradigm that protest was a logical, natural response to something a decision you don't like. And that buildings are immaterial, property is immaterial, lives are material, but the rest of it is nothing. So you can't have that for the Democrat side. When I watched them try to overthrow the White House gates and the Secret Service have to beat them off, and they took the president down, well, he said he was just going down there to check the bunker out, but they took the president down to a bunker because they were trying to breach the White House perimeter. The Democrats said that was fine. Then they turn around, oh my God, it's the holy Capitol. How dare you come to the holy Capitol? Wait a minute.
Right.
You can't tell us the Lincoln Memorial is nothing but a monument. When they defaced the Lincoln Memorial, that's nothing. They tried to breach the White House, that's nothing. They tried to do, that's nothing. But it's the holy Capitol. No, it's hypocrisy.
It's
pure
hypocrisy.
And simple.
Absolutely. And it's hypocrisy because if your standard of right and wrong is dependent on whether it's Republicans versus Democrats doing it,
right.
then you don't have standards. And that's exactly what you're talking about with the Madison Cawthorn example. That's exactly what you're talking about with the January 6th example. That's exactly what you're talking about in all of these examples. It's the same thing that I was talking about with my good friend Dave Rubin, who was a Democrat and is now a conservative. He's openly homosexual, and he posted pictures of how he and his partner are using surrogates to then be able to have children. And everybody, including Glenn Beck, was saying, this is such an interesting issue, and thank you for your bravery, so stunning and brave when a conservative does this. But just a few weeks ago, all the conservatives were making fun of Pete Buttigieg and his partner for the exact same thing and saying this is wrong and these pictures are disgusting. And the only difference between the two, the only difference is one is a Democrat, one is a conservative. That is not the standard, but we are so tribalistic now, and we all are so caught up in this us versus them mentality, win at all costs, including sacrificing our principles, that we fail to see that hypocrisy. And then what happens when people like you and I, Pastor Scott, stand up and go, wait a minute, there's a principle here, and we call out Madison Cawthorn, or we defend the Walt Disney Company based on principle, not content, then suddenly we're the rhinos, we're the traitors, and we deserve punishment. Even people saying up to, and I've had tweets over the last weekend saying, you should jump off a bridge. I mean, people literally calling for my death because I said one thing they disagree with when they followed me for years. What does that tell you about the state of conservatism in America?
It's a bad state to be in. It's like a number of those on the conservative side have gone off the deep end. And we are, when someone accuses us of what we accuse others of, we don't like it. The left is accusing the right of suppression of information with CRT. We don't want this, that's become a hot stove. And, it's almost like we're taking turns accusing each other of the same thing in principle, even though the practice itself might be a different practice, but the principle is the same. And it's getting out of hand. It's getting downright ridiculous. It's getting ridiculous because it's almost like you have to choose sides. And it's a faction, even in the Republican Party now. You're either MAGA or you're not. if you're MAGA, you're a true conservative. If you're not MAGA, you're not a true conservative. You have people that have been in the Republican Party for decades. What did Mo Green say in The Godfather? I made my bones when you were going out with cheerleaders. There are Republicans that made their bones when we were babies, when we weren't thinking about it. And now we want to accuse them of not being real Republicans simply because they don't agree line upon line and precept upon precept with every single thing that comes out of a certain faction of the Republican Party. That we're discouraging free and open debate now. We're discouraging that. We're discouraging open dialogue and pros and cons. We don't want to respect each other's right to disagree. We don't want to disagree agreeably. And it's getting out of hand.
It is. And then we're teaching the next generation, like Josh Hammer's piece of Against Principled Loserdom. He's suggesting that the Constitution and being principled is an antiquated boomerism notion that should not be taken up by the new mantle of the conservative right. And there is a huge, huge danger in that, because who is going to define then what it really means to be MAGA? I mean, I find this so interesting that people who, like last night, you and I were actually texting about this because there was somebody who responded to you that said, well, my voice doesn't have as much of an impact because I'm just here sitting on my couch while Disney is this global corporation with so much influence. And my response was, then get up off of your couch and actually go build a global corporation. If you want your speech to have as much impact as Disney's, that's on you. That's not for the government to fight your battles for you and to restrain someone you disagree with because you want to sit on your couch and then complain about how people like Pastor Darrell and I are actually fighting the fights that we're fighting. And people forget, Pastor Darrell, that, you and I have been in this fight for a long time, but we're just regular people. I mean, I find it so fascinating that people think that just because we're on TV or we have these platforms, that somehow we aren't just doing this out of our principles and aren't just regular people. We must have some kind of nefarious motive. We must really be working to undermine everything. Where you have known Donald Trump as a personal friend for how long? Over a decade? And I've known him
about 11 years, 12 years, something like that.
Yeah, and yet you're the one that's not MAGA enough. I mean, what does that mean?
And I remember, Jenna, listen, I was the one black person that was with him. Not the one black man, the one black person that was with him when he was number 17 in a primary field of 17. And to be quite honest, I always say, if he'd have dropped out, I was dropping out with him. There was no grip. I was with him. He's my friend. I'm backing my friend. And when he lost, when he rolled off into the sunset, if he'd have lost and got eliminated, I would have went with him. So there was never any nefarious intent. But let's go back to something else you're saying, because it caused something to come to my mind. Because I had this conversation with people on Twitter and different social media, and it demonstrates the mindset of the right. There's a faction of the right, of the MAGA, that sees nothing wrong with the Confederate flag. There's another faction of MAGA, the black community faction, that sees everything wrong with the Confederate flag. And it's a hot stove event when you want to push that button. That there are those that are defending, it doesn't symbolize slavery, and it doesn't symbolize it's Southern pride. It symbolizes that, and we don't have anything. And then you have others that are, no, it symbolizes, you need to ban the Confederate flag. And they're like, no, you shouldn't. And so that same type of mindset should be here. There are a lot of people that find the Confederate flag offensive. And you have those that say, simply because you find it offensive doesn't mean I shouldn't be able to fly mine. I should still be able to exercise my free ability to have free expression and fly this flag all I want. I shouldn't have to worry about you attacking my car if I have a Confederate bumper sticker on it. I shouldn't have to worry about you attacking me if I wear a Confederate flag on my jacket. Right. And so you can translate this same to Disney and like, no, that doesn't apply. Well, yes, it does. Because what's good for the goose has to be good for the gander as well. And we can find offense in a lot of different things that, and you know what's funny? They don't care how many black people get offended over that flag. I'm wearing my flag anyway. And I'm still this. You see what I'm saying? And they won't allow people to question their commitment to the country. They won't allow people to question. Some say, well, that flag is a symbol of rebellion against the United States government. They want to overthrow the government. No, it's not. Well, to me it is. To me it isn't. Okay. So for you to say this is a matter of free speech. No, it's not. Well, to me it is. To me it isn't. Okay, well, we just agree to differ then.
Right. And the Constitution has to protect both. And that's the entire point. And somewhere Joy Reid's head is exploding right now that we're even having this conversation, because everything is racist, right? Everything she disagrees with is racist, and it's hate speech, and it's abhorrent. But then suddenly, when I started talking about Disney and said, oh, well, I can disagree with the content of their speech, but I will absolutely protect their right to say it, then she goes and tweets, God help me, I agree with Jenna Ellis. And I'm like, yeah, but you only agree with the content of what I'm saying, not the principle. And that's the problem. Because when leftists and now people on the right can't see past their own passion and opinion on an issue, and they want the rule to be, if I approve, then the Constitution does, they are totally missing it, because no one in this country can have that as the standard. That it's not Ron DeSantis's opinion that ultimately defines what speech is objectionable. It's not my opinion. It's not Joy Reid's opinion. It's not your opinion. That is why the ability to speak and debate is protected for all, because we all will find things offensive, even hate speech. There was a great article in the Wall Street Journal today by my friend Vivek Ramaswamy, and we were talking about this earlier, and I want to have him on the show. And he wrote a great piece everyone needs to read in the Wall Street Journal talking about what Elon Musk needs to do for Twitter. And he was saying, as an attorney as well, he was saying there are so many just very odious and frankly disturbing messages and content that are still protected under the First Amendment. And so when we're talking about the context of misinformation or hate speech or other things, that type of content moderation can't be the rule that what Jack Dorsey thought was hate speech, or whoever was on Twitter, what they thought they could censor. And now what Elon Musk, in his own personal political view, thinks is hate speech is offensive. I mean, what if I think it's hate speech for people to tell blonde jokes, right? And then suddenly all of that should be misinformation and hate speech on Twitter and ban the accounts? I mean, I can click block, I can click mute. I can really be okay with that, And so for people who don't understand that hate speech, by defining something as unconstitutional or worthy of government prior restraint, or even prior restraint in the public square on private platforms like Twitter, they're playing a very dangerous game, and they never like it when it's wielded against them.
Yeah, absolutely right. Remember the uproar that was caused when I was around back in my pre-Christian life. We had a nightclub in Cleveland. It was almost Cleveland's version of Studio 54. And I knew a lot of the emerging rap artists because, in the 70s, I was involved in a lot of music promotion and promoting artists and knew a lot of well-known artists. But we were part of the emerging rap genre. We had people like at our club, the Sugar Hill Gang and Curtis Blow. When rap started off as just party anthems and This Is Us and hip hop, hippie. But then as it began to slowly take on this dark component and the words began to get more raw and more graphic and more filthy and more nasty, you had a segment of the government that wanted to be able to suppress that. And they all said, because of free speech, we should be able to curse and stuff like we want to on these records. Now, they were right about that. Me personally, I didn't like it. Did I allow my daughter to listen to it? No.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to say they didn't have the right to make records like that. Now, it was up to me to control my family as to whether or not I'm going to allow it into my house. But I had to respect their right to do it, where there would have been a faction that says, no, you can't do that because I don't like it. And then who is this great moral arbiter of what's right and what's wrong for everyone? There's nobody, only God can be that. And if we try to adhere to godly standards, we make sure we practice these standards at home.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about the world or secular society having a greater influence on our homes and families than we do as a home and family.
Absolutely. So well said in this. And I was reminded, this is why our founders expressed that our Constitution is built only for a moral and upright people. It is wholly inadequate to a society of any other. And I know I'm butchering that quote a little bit, but the whole point is that it is inadequate to any types of immorality. Why? Because they know that government is not given the power with which to restrain people from their own choices. And so you have the entire point of criminal law is that you actually have the ability to go and perpetrate criminal offenses. You will get punished for them. But you have due process first. The government does not do what's called prior restraint. And that's where we have these choices in our society, and especially when it comes to speech. We all have the ability to exercise our constitutionally protected rights. And if we truly want to restrain culture from being morally corrupt and evil, the solution our founders gave was not the government. The solution our founders gave was the ability for the church to teach truth, for parents to teach truth to their children, and for us to make a difference by changing hearts and minds, not by overpowering the enemy. And I think there's a huge distinction there.
And you're absolutely right. And a number of our founding fathers were not bashful in saying that they believed the Bible set the standard for right conduct, for morality, for right behavior, for right thought process, but they weren't going to force anyone to observe or adhere to biblical principles. But a number of our founding fathers were very opinionated in that regard, that even in invoking the fact that all men are created equal. It doesn't say all men evolved equally. Right. It says all men are created equal. And we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. These are things that we believe are rights to human beings, and free expression of speech without fear of retaliation by the government. They don't understand. That is what you're saying, that there should not be any government retaliation. I don't want to go out and be outspoken in such a way. The next thing I know, the feds are kicking my door in because of something I said.
Right. That would be China. That would be Russia. That would be the Soviet Union. That would be all of these societies that we in America find viscerally abhorrent for exactly that reason. Right. Now, there is an emphasis on by the government, because can the private individual like you and me retaliate against Disney? Can we cancel subscriptions? Can we, go and we can say we're going to sell our stock. We're going to not ever go to Disney World again. We're going to boycott. We're going to, if you choose as a private individual to retaliate because of speech in lawfully appropriate manner, of course you can't, go burn down the Magic Kingdom. I mean, obviously there are restraints on actions, but if you want to retaliate and say, Disney, because of your speech, and I disagree with it, I am now going to take action, lawful action, and say I'm not willing to put up with this. That's absolutely part of the free marketplace of ideas. And guess what? You are then speaking with your dollars, with your voice, with your subscriptions, and you absolutely have the right to do that, as much as Disney has the right to say their viewpoint. And viewpoint discrimination by the government is what we're talking about here. Anybody can have viewpoint discrimination as a private individual. I can say, you know what? I don't really like your viewpoints. You're kind of a leftist. You have all of these things. So guess what? I'm not going to allow you around my kids. I'm not going to choose this school over that one because I don't like what's being taught there. And so I'm going to go to a different one. I don't like how this pastor teaches about soteriology or theology or whatever. So I'm going to choose and go to that one. I'm going to choose this person over that one to date. And suddenly, the left is saying, oh, this is bigotry to say that, you won't be okay with dating, trans people. And it's like, yeah, that's my choice. And that's totally
right.
Fine.
Thank you.
That's totally fine. But for the government to step in and say, we can't even have these conversations because one side they don't prefer, that becomes the area of constitutional problems. And that is the difference of what we're talking about here. And so for the people, Pastor Darrell, who are pushing back and saying, well, this is such an abhorrent moral evil, that is being foisted on our kids. Well, that's exactly why the Parental Rights and Education Bill was perfectly lawful. And this is exactly why you expressing those opinions are perfectly lawful. But this is why the government cannot retaliate, because if it defines Disney's speech as abhorrent, it can so easily in a blue state define Christian worldview opinions as abhorrent and therefore suppressionable, censorship, and retaliation against our viewpoints.
You're absolutely right. And what's sad is our side, right now, when I say our side, I'm saying the right, it seems as if I'm saying it seems as if the left wants to uphold constitutional rights, in some cases, more so than the right. I'll give you a case in point. If it had been up to those of us on the right, I'm going to say us, even though I'm not including myself in what I'm about to say.
Because we're rhinos now, remember.
If the government had intervened and said, all NFL players and all NBA players are ordered to stand or you're going to jail. There are a lot of people on our side that would not have had a problem with that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people in the MAGA crowd and the Republican crowd. Like, hell yeah, take them to jail. They need to go to jail because they won't kneel for the flag. They won't stand for the national anthem. They would have been perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
And it's a sad but true reality. Now, my personal opinion on that is I stand for the flag. My grandson played high school basketball. He now plays college basketball. And I made this observation. I was at one of his games. And before each game, they played the national anthem. And I was standing there. And I was standing there, take my hat off, put my hand over my heart, salute the flag. A lot of the kids were talking, milling around, or whatever. But I never thought that someone should grab the mic and say, hey, all you kids, you shut up, you get it attention, and you put your hand over your heart, and you salute this flag.
Or else.
Listen, I'm going to do it. I was oblivious to what everybody else was doing. Yeah. I honored the flag. I kept my face focused on it. Now, once again, there was a segment on our side that if the government had mandated that all professional sports players had to stand at attention, and if you kneeled, you did it with the possibility of consequence, we wouldn't have had a problem with it. A lot of people on our side would not have had a problem with that. And that's the part that's scary, that oftentimes we want to be the party of traditional family values and morality, and we hold ourselves to a higher standard than those scumbag Democrats. But in certain respects, they want to uphold certain elements of the Constitution more so than we do.
Yeah, and that is the sad reality, and so well said, because this is where we see this almost fomenting of righteous anger, but misplaced and misguided in terms of what constitutes a win. Because instead of having this public debate and saying, you know what, then I'm going to turn off NFL, or I'm going to, like what President Trump did, just say, these guys are total losers, and expressing that and condemning that type of action and explaining why and saying, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stand for the flag. Just like there was a great video where, and I think it was at a baseball game, where they didn't sing the national anthem. And so the crowd just started singing it anyway. And I loved it because I thought that's the appropriate response. It's not to say, government, come in and shut down this ballpark because they refuse to honor the flag. Or, we even have laws that say it's actually okay to burn the American flag. Would I ever do that? No. But for someone else who, during some of the 60s and 70s.
And Vietnam, that's my generation.
and who were saying this is symbolic because we are protesting what we believe is the wrong direction, and so this is an act of symbolic speech that should be protected. As abhorrent as some people who say, well, I'm a veteran and I fought and died for that flag. Yes. But what they fought and bled for, and some have paid the ultimate price and the last full measure of their devotion, was also the right for people to disagree with our government. And that's what makes America so great, is that Disney can disagree with what the state of Florida is doing. And we can disagree with them without government retaliation. And you're so right that conservatives are playing a very dangerous game, and we are not better than the left in any way if we say, hey, when we hold power, we're going to wield it in ways and make you suffer and put out all this kind of revenge and retaliation, but we're going to object to it when a Democrat does it. That's not
absolutely right. There's a friend of mine. In fact, I want to introduce you to him. I think you would love to have him on your show. He's a professional basketball player, Jonathan Isaac, a born-again Christian, a minister, an ordained minister.
Wow.
And he has a book called Why I Stand. And there's a picture on it. He plays for the Orlando Magic NBA team right now. And when everybody kneeled, he didn't kneel. He stood. And he said, he talked to his teammates and said, my belief in God and my love for this country won't allow me to kneel. But here's the thing. Everybody on the team kneeled except for him. But he didn't have a problem with them kneeling, and they didn't have a problem with him standing. Mm-hmm. And so he has a book out called Why I Stand, and it's a great book. I want to introduce you to him. I believe you'll like him. And he has a great story to tell. But, they respected his right. And in the locker room, it might have got a little tense. It took a lot for him to stand up when everybody else was kneeling. But he had the right to stand. They had the right to kneel. And one didn't have the right to take that right away from the other.
Yeah.
And as much as I might not have liked their kneeling, they had the right to kneel. As much as they might not have liked their standing, he had a right to stand. As much as I might have might not like what Disney's message is, they have a right to say it without fear of government retaliation. Now, I can retaliate. How? I'm not watching the Disney Channel anymore. I'm not spending my money with Disney. That's my retaliation if I choose to do so. But I can't take away their right to express themselves.
So well said. So, hopefully people who are watching this actually understand the debate more fully and the consequences. And I think not only the cultural consequences, but also the political consequences and ultimately the legal consequences if we go down this road. And we've been trying to have this debate over the last probably full week. And, you and I, Pastor, have gotten a lot of flack for this. There have been a lot of people, prominent people and, just even, very private friends of mine who've texted me privately and have said, you're right, but I don't want to make myself a target for the MAGA mob revenge. And I just thought, if that's my goal, then what am I doing? Because my obligation, of course, is to follow the Constitution, to have the hard conversations, and ultimately to serve Christ and to speak truth and win hearts and souls for God. But because of that, also in the political space, protect the right to speak together about truth, which is ultimately what the First Amendment is all about. And how do you think, get through to some of these people who are on the conservative side now, but clearly aren't Christians? Because I see this danger in the greater Republican Party that we're so focused on capitalism and winning and, all kinds of policy issues, but we're missing the heart and the foundation that it's all about Christian principles to allow us to have the measurable difference between right and wrong and good and evil and restraining our government.
I mean, you're absolutely right. There's an absence of that. And then there are a lot of non-Christians that want to tell Christians how Christians should behave. Yeah. That's the problem I have. Jenna, you're a lawyer. I'm not. I can't tell you how you should practice law when the only law that I know of is from watching Perry Mason or whatever, Matlock or something on TV when I'm totally unskilled and unversed in that area. And there are a lot of non-Christians that want to define what Christian behavior is or should be. And that's what's wrong, and that we have this ungodly element in the Republican Party, as well as the Democratic Party. There's an ungodly element in the Republican Party as well that seeks to influence the entire party. But they're not based in any type of godly principles. And as a result, and like you said, it's about power, getting power, keeping power, and wielding power. And that's what their goal is. And like you said, we can't say, I can't wait for us to win office so we can get revenge and we can retaliate and we can go scorched earth on those lousy Democrats. People tell me, you sound like a Democrat, as if that's...
It's
you have to understand. I know a lot of Democrats. A lot of my family members are Democrats. I don't hate them because they have opposing political views.
Yeah.
I might hate my family because they don't vote for my candidate. It's ridiculous.
So many people in 2016, and it started on the left, where there were so many op-eds saying, get rid of your family and you need to excise these toxic individuals who are Trumpers, But now the right has unfortunately taken a lot of that behavior, and instead of saying, well, wait a second, we can sit down and have rational conversations, they're saying excise these toxic leftists from our lives. And of course, there's a difference between what we expose our children to, what policies we set. And there is also a difference between what the Republican Party actually says when someone like Ronna McDaniel is tweeting openly affirming Pride Week and affirming that, LGBT agendas have a home in the Republican Party. And yet all of these conservatives who are so concerned about woke Disney, they're not as outraged about that as they are about Disney. And I wonder why. Well, because it's tribalism. And they say, well, we just want to win and we have to have this big tent. And it's like, no, what you're actually saying is it's okay. The same principle is okay. The same speech is okay when the Republican Party says it, but when Walt Disney, this woke company, says it, it's not okay. And they can't wrap their head around the fact that, now, does Ronna McDaniel have a constitutionally protected right to say that? Sure. But I don't have an obligation to be part of the Republican Party or to say that she's right in that. And when I went out against that, it was like, oh, you just don't want to win, and you just are a hypocrite, and you hate Trump now, and like all of these other things. Instead of recognizing I disagree with her speech, and I disagree with being a part of a political party that is willing to agree with Pride Month and agree with the LGBT agenda. But I also disagree with the content of Disney's speech. But I agree with their right to say it. People somehow can't parse any of these issues anymore.
Absolutely right. And you know what? Here's what a lot of people in social media, I hate to say it, but sometimes I just can't help but being blunt. They don't realize a lot of the things that they're getting twisted about, they don't even realize it's all about votes. And it's all about getting power. Ronna recognizes the fact that the LGBT community is a huge voting bloc. And if we want to be successful in winning elections, we're going to need the LGBTQ, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We're going to need the alphabet vote.
Yes.
So the hell with principles, the hell with all of that. We need that vote. Mm-hmm. And we need it at any cost and at all costs. So we'll compromise our principles for the sake of that vote. And that's all it is. Mm-hmm. And you're telling yourself, if I have to get the vote that bad, then I'd rather not have it. Yeah. If I have to compromise my principles and compromise everything that I believe for the sake of a vote, then there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. A lot of things that a lot of people are getting twisted about. I mean, you know me, I'm honest to a fault. Let's take CIT, for instance. Mm-hmm. I'm opposed to it, the radical element of the teaching.
Yeah.
But people don't realize the reason it's a hot stove button topic right now is simply because it's something that we can use to appeal to the suburban white woman, the suburban white mother. We lost the suburban white mother vote in 2020. How do we get it back? What message appeals to them? CRT. We're scaring them into voting for us. Because if you vote for the other side, they're going to teach your children that they're racist. And sometimes I feel like the American public is simply pawns on a political chessboard and don't even realize it.
Yeah, and
they don't even realize
it. And that's exactly it, is that this is all about power. It's not about principled winning.
Right.
It's just about winning at all costs. And that's where I would rather have some losses and be principled and have the wins in the long term, like how we fight at the Supreme Court. And, people are going, well, then we'll be caught up in litigation for a decade. Well, that's kind of how we do things in America. It's not that we take these easy wins and are unprincipled, because if you want to be an unprincipled winner, I guarantee you will be an unprincipled loser in the long term. And I am willing only to be a principled winner.
That caused something to come to my mind about my grandson. Several years ago, he was playing for a basketball team, and the coach they had the guys on the team that were really, really butter up to the coach and bring him cookies and donuts and stuff like that, and they got more playing time. My grandson wouldn't do it, so I said, man, listen. And he said, the reason this one and this one and this one is playing is because they suck up to him. So I said, well, listen, man, if that's what you got to do to get more playing time, just do it. And he lived, eat, breathe, sleep basketball. You know what he looked at me and said? He said, well, I just don't play then. I just had to sit on the bench because I'm not sucking up. And I was proud of him for saying that. Yeah. That as bad as I want to play and as much as I want to compete, and I know I'm better than these other ones, if that's what it takes for me to be able to play, then I'm not compromising my inner convictions. I raised him not to be a suck up. Mm-hmm. And then I'm telling him to suck up. So I'm sitting in mixed messages, man, you want to play suck up? I'm not doing it. And I was secretly proud of him. I was glad. And that's what it is. You can't compromise your inner convictions for the sake of what you consider to be success.
Yes.
And a lot of people are willing to do it.
They are, and it's such a losing game in the long term. And this is why
Yes.
this tribalism and these people that say you have to always side with MAGA and President Trump is the savior that can do no wrong. And if you speak one thing against any of his endorsements or anything that he says, then all of a sudden, you were really somebody who didn't fight for him, and you didn't, you're out to sabotage him and all this other stuff, where it's like, Trump is a human being, and he's also a politician. And as an American citizen, as a voter, of course I can disagree with him. And in fact, having those conversations is a good thing. There is no reason that just because I'm not Democrat, I have to support 100% of what the MAGA base says. Otherwise, I'm a traitor, I'm a fraudster, I'm all of these other things. It's not a binary black and white situation. And that's the tribalism, and that's the kind of civil war mentality that is these two sides, and there's no middle of let's actually debate and discuss, and the freedom and the right ultimately to disagree. And people just don't want to hear it. And I think because they want so much to play on that field that they're willing not just to suck up, but to sacrifice their principles. I'm proud of your son for not doing that, because that's exactly what I feel like I'm doing as well.
Let me tell you something. I'm gonna go along with what you just said. A lot of people now they were saying stuff to me like, "Hey, he's Jesse Jackson and he's Ben Crump now, right?" So I said, first of all, listen, Ben Crump is a lawyer that's being paid to litigate. He's out here winning cases, so he's doing his job. People that hire him aren't hiring him to lose. They're hiring him to win. I can't get mad at him for doing his job. I said, but what you guys don't know about Jesse Jackson, first of all, Jesse and I have been friends for a long time. What people don't know is this. Back in 2015, you know what Jesse Jackson told me? He said, me and Trump have been friends for a long time. You stick with him. It's good for you to be with him. He said, because if he wins, we need somebody from our community over on that side that has some influence. They don't know that. Jesse Jackson told me, stick with him. What they also don't know is this. Jesse Jackson called the White House on a regular basis from 2016 to 2020. Jesse Jackson was instrumental in the president pardoning Rod Blagojevich. I know this for a fact. I'm not telling you what I heard. I'm telling you what I know. The people they tend to hate, listen, don't fight another man's battle sometime. You want to hate Jesse for Trump, but Trump don't hate Jesse. That's what they don't understand. President Trump and Jesse Jackson have been friends for a long time. They disagree politically, but they've still been friends for decades. And they don't understand that they're getting all twisted about stuff that they don't even really know what they're getting twisted about.
Yeah, they have been friends for decades. And guess what? President Trump was willing to listen to him on that issue. Yeah. And just say, because I disagree with you on, maybe 90% of things, I don't know, I'm not going to speak for President Trump on that, that he wasn't willing to listen to people on specific issues. And that's exactly what makes this country great. And that's exactly why there is also a difference, like you said, between a lawyer's obligation to represent their client's best interests versus what they themselves think personally.
Thank you.
There's a huge distinction there as well. And obviously, if your client wants you to do something that's against the law, or, you find you disagree on the litigation strategy, lawyers are not compelled to represent clients.
Right.
But when you do, you represent their interests. And so the distinction that people often don't understand is that people are actually entitled to a defense in this country. That's why we have due process. And so it is incredibly important to recognize that there is a distinction between correct lawyering and having these types of battles in court versus political opinion. And I'm so grateful for your openness about that story with Jesse Jackson. Yeah. And, I'm so grateful that President Trump didn't say, oh, well, look at, when Jenna was supporting Ted Cruz, she questioned me. I didn't know him back then. And everybody loves to use the statements that I said about some concerns that I had and saying, I disagree with certain statements that he made. I have never defended, as a Christian, I have never defended the things that I think he did that were morally wrong. And guess what? As a Christian, I'm never going to defend anything I've done that's morally wrong either. But that didn't stop me from changing my mind about him being the best presidential candidate in 2016. And it certainly didn't stop me from eagerly representing him and being able to have these conversations about the Constitution and seeing a whole different side of him that, I love him. I consider him a dear friend. And those types of things and those complexities about the human condition, about politics, about how people can change their opinion based on new information, the difference between championing his policies and election integrity and all of these things are very different than saying, sure, it's fine for anybody to go out and commit adultery. I mean, it's just people can't parse these things anymore.
Right.
Like, we are more complex than that, and we also lose the span of time and how it's a different consideration for a lot of people in 2016 who they supported versus 2020 versus now in 2024. And so we have to have these conversations. So Pastor, I
got one question for you. I have one question before I go. I know I have to go. I have one question for you. I don't know if you saw it or not. Did you see any of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard? This is a legal question I have for you. Did you see the part?
I saw some of it.
Did you see the part where Amber Heard's lawyer had a guy on the witness stand, asked the guy a question, and then said, I object to the guy's answer. And the guy said, you asked me the question. The lawyer asked him a question. He started answering. The lawyer said, I object. And the guy said, hey, you asked me the question. What are you talking about?
I didn't see that part.
If you didn't see it, I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you. Everybody laughed. Even the lawyer was like, oh, yeah, you're right. I did. I'm like,
yeah. That is hilarious. And you know what? But that's where that lawyer, I'm sure, is incredibly proficient, trial lawyer, all those things. But that's just the live nature of being in the moment and having, I can say this from practicing trial law, from being in front of, tons of juries in my career lifespan. And, you are thinking about 27 different things.
Right.
And some of those moments happen. And that doesn't mean he's a bad lawyer. It's a hilarious moment.
He laughed himself. He laughed himself.
And good for him, because things like that happen, all the time. And that was what made court to me so much fun too, was that kind of, sometimes those moments and those banters, even judges going, well, wait a second, hang on. I actually had a judge one time that goes, well, wait a second. No, I'm going to overrule myself. Let me state this again. And it was a lighthearted moment. And it was great. So, but Pastor Darrell, thank you so much for standing on the truth and being such a good friend, but also recognizing these are complex issues and we have to remain principled and we have to remain conservative Christians. I respect and love you so much. So thank you for everything.
Thank you. God bless you. I pray for you. Pray for me. You're my friend.
Yes.
We'll talk.
I also want to talk about another great American who is the sponsor of this podcast, and that, of course, is my good friend Mike Lindell. He has been canceled out of so many box stores for simply standing up for his own political opinion. And disagree or not, or support him or not, it is a fundamental right of every American to be able to voice their opinion, and that absolutely includes politics. That absolutely includes issues that are central to our culture. That includes faith. Mike is such a very sincere Christian, and I am proud to consider him a friend, and he is, of course, a friend of this show. So right now, there is a special on MyPillow.com. Click on the new radio listener specials. Get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including a great towel set, which is a 6-piece set. It includes 2 bath, 2 hand towels, 2 washcloths, made in the USA, regularly $109.99, now just $39.99, but you have to use the promo code Jenna. That's Jenna. That tells Mike that you listen to this show, you're happy that he is a sponsor of this show, and you will get great discounts, but use the promo code Jenna, that's Jenna, either at mypillow.com or call 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna.